Is this the end of the diamond era? For decades, diamond revenues paid for Botswana's schools, hospitals, and general stability. But now, South Africa's next door neighbor is confronting a possibility it's never had to seriously plan for, that diamond prices may never recover. Now, that warning isn't coming from critics or analysts. It's coming from Botswana's own finance ministry. Officials say that mineral revenues this year could fall to less than half of their long-term average. I mean, demand has just weakened as Chinese luxury spending cools, lab-grown diamonds take market share, and new US tariffs squeeze India, the world's largest diamond cutting hub. Prices are sliding, with some forecasts putting rough diamonds at about $99 a carat. The bigger problem, though, is sitting in storage. Botswana is holding roughly 12 million unsold carats of diamonds, nearly double its own target inventory. And so with stockpiles that high, mining more doesn't solve that gap. It risks making it worse by pushing prices further down. So it's hard to believe, but diamonds usually bring in about 1/3 of Botswana's revenue. And so this isn't just a bad cycle. It's a warning that this diamond-funded model may be hitting its limits, and that revenue diversification is no longer just a long-term ambition anymore, but rather a very urgent task. Now, for South Africa, this isn't just a story across the border. It points to the importance of diversification, a reminder of how quickly a commodity-led model can turn when global demand shifts and when consumer preferences change. I mean, lab-grown diamonds, once dismissed as these cheap knockoffs, are now cleaner, cheaper, and increasingly accepted by younger buyers. And so for countries built on these natural stones, that shift matters. Botswana's challenge is no longer just about price points or production. It's about whether the world still values real diamonds the way that it used to. And that question now sits with the consumers too. I mean, here's a question for you. If you were buying an engagement ring today, would you choose natural or lab-grown, and why? If commodity dependence is Botswana's pressure point, South Africa is looking at a different kind of system risk, one where the fight isn't over market forces, but over who controls the fix. South Africa's government is calling for peace talks on national health insurance, even as most of the key players are wrapping their hands for a long court fight. This week, our finance minister urged organizations challenging the NHI to hit pause and negotiate instead, warning that years of legal battles could tie it up for over a decade. Now, just for a quick refresher, the stated aim of the NHI is to move South Africa towards universal healthcare, ensuring that access to care isn't determined by income or employment. But that controversy here lies in how government plans to do that through a centralized government-controlled health fund that would fundamentally reshape the role of medical schemes, private providers, and provincial health authorities. Now, that structure is where things start to fracture. Before the NHI has even been rolled out, 9 court challenges are already lined up, questioning everything from how the NHI would be funded to who controls it to whether parts of this act are even constitutional. Some groups like doctors' associations say that they're still willing to talk. Others, though, from medical schemes to business groups to the Western Cape governments, argue that these concerns have already been raised and just brushed aside. And so for them, negotiations don't resolve the core risks. For them, this isn't a negotiation problem. It's a design problem. And until that changes, the fight stays in court. Now, that's the policy battle, but pressure shows up in other places too, sometimes in what's disappearing rather than what's contested. South Africa's stock market is hitting record highs, but underneath that scoreboard, it's quietly shrinking. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange keeps pushing past new index milestones, even as the number of companies actually listed on it keep falling. And so we essentially have 2 JSEs now operating at the same time, one that's looking strong on the charts and the other that's steadily losing depth. Over time, that gap widened. In the 1990s, the JSE had well over 600 listed companies. Today, it has fewer than 300. Now, some firms were bought out, others went private, and many simply decided that just the cost and complexity of staying listed no longer made sense. And so the result here is a thinner market increasingly dominated by a handful of giants. That slow bleed is what's forced the exchange to shift its approach. This week, regulators approved a major overhaul of the JSE's listing rules, cutting its requirements by more than half, simplifying disclosure language, and easing compliance for these smaller companies. So the signal here is subtle, but it's important. The old model wasn't working, and the exchange knows it. The real test now isn't whether the rules read better, it's what happens next. This year will show whether delistings slow and whether new firms decide that the JSE is once again worth listing on. That's the evidence that the markets will be watching for in the months ahead. And before we cruise on to our bagel bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, power from Koeberg, South Africa's nuclear power station, was cut by almost 90% after a substation fault near Stellenbosch, likely triggered by fault fires. Eskom says the reactors were unaffected and output was already being ramped back up overnight. And on that note, South Africa spent nearly 200 billion rand on energy subsidies in 2025, according to a new report, with most of that money supporting fossil fuels and Eskom. That's despite long-standing promises to reduce reliance on coal and oil. And then institutional investors asked the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to step in over Mr. Price's contentious 9.7 billion rand NKD deal, arguing that a series of acquisitions should trigger a shareholder vote. And on to our bagel bite of the day. But first, just a side note, you know how it goes. If you're enjoying the show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It does wonders for our videos. And now, with that out the way, let's see what you got. The question is, when was the tech giant Apple founded? Was it A, 1976, B, 1986, or C, 1996? We'll give you all the answer at the end of the show. So I've told the following story way back when, but just given the diamond theme in today's show, I just wanted to use the opportunity to tell it again. It's one of my favorites. In 1905, just outside Pretoria, a mine manager noticed a strange sparkle in the wall of the Cullinan mine. And what he pulled out weighed 3,106 carats, the largest gem quality diamond ever discovered. Now, the find itself was heroic, but what came next was unfamiliar territory. You see, the Cullinan was so valuable that moving it safely became a problem that no one had the playbook for. So as you can imagine, any obvious logistics and security plan felt like an invitation to steal it. And so officials flipped the script. They staged a loud, very public operation, a decoy diamond sealed in a box, surrounded by armed guards and paraded onto a ship. Newspapers covered the spectacle, crowds watched along, and if you were planning a heist, that was your target. But according to historical records, the real Cullinan never went near that ship. Instead, it was quietly wrapped, insured, and sent to London by ordinary registered post. No convoy, no soldiers, no headlines. And so while everyone watched the fake diamond cross the ocean, the real one slipped through the system unnoticed, a move straight out of Ocean's 11. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is 1976. You see, Apple began with Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a third co-founder, Ronald Wayne, who sold his stake weeks later. A reminder that belief and not just timing shapes who benefits from history. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for our final daily bagel show of the work week. It's going to be a goodie. Otherwise, hope you guys have a great day further. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all then. God bless.